Joining me now, former Florida Congressman David Jolly and Brendan Buck, former senior advisor to House Speakers John Boehner and Paul Ryan. So, Brendan, first, read this morning, NBC's team is saying that this was the most consequential week of the 2024 contest yet. With our NBC Des Moines Register Mediacom poll of Iowa, the debate, the Trump arrest, the mugshot, where do things stand for the Republican Party and the primary candidates after all of that?
Yeah, enormous week, but it's hard to really say that a whole lot has changed. I mean, you have Ron DeSantis saying the words, "It is what it is," when the frontrunner has gotten himself indicted for the fourth time, or arrested, I guess, for the fourth time. This kind of shows you that these people are not really taking a serious effort to go after him. Look, this is an enormous vulnerability for Donald Trump, but a vulnerability only matters if someone is going to exploit it, and clearly they're not going to do it. I think the much more important thing to focus on is the general election at this point. I'm convinced at this point that people running in the primary are not really putting in much of a serious effort. And so you got to look at this in the context of a general election. Donald Trump is most likely going to be the Republican nominee. And what happened this week is clearly significantly damaging to him in a general election, and yet they're leaning into it. I mean, they're putting his face on T-shirts, his mugshot on T-shirts. I think they need to take this a little more seriously. I get it why they're doing it. Republican voters love the ethos of never backing down. But this is, I think, a very significant long-term problem for Donald Trump if he wants to actually be president again.
And what about Ron DeSantis, David Jolly? You know Florida politics. So he goes to Iowa. He goes to the Field of Dreams, you know, everybody's favorite baseball movie. And he's throwing softballs at the kids there. He's got the whole family. Was that a good move? We always used to praise Ronald Reagan for his photo ops.
It is. Look, Ron DeSantis still, since the beginning of his campaign, has largely done all of the things that a heavyweight traditional candidate does. It's just not resonating. But you've seen him do the foreign trip. He's done the early states. He has his family on the ball field. But to Brendan's point, if you're not willing to deliver a message about the vulnerability of Donald Trump, then you're really going to have a hard time catching him. And at this point, the reason the field has so handicapped themselves in trying to chase Donald Trump is they all raised their hands and said, even if he's convicted, I'll still vote for him. So how do you make the case when Ramaswamy says that Donald Trump's the best president this century, and everybody else says even if he's a criminal convict, I'll still support Donald Trump? How do you turn around and tell Republican voters, but you should support me instead? And so Ron DeSantis is going through the motions of a heavyweight candidate, but his message simply is not working in a way that he could catch Donald Trump.
And I'm wondering, Brendan, I know you said, and it makes sense that the general election voter will not take so kindly to the Donald Trump, criminal problems, the allegations, the arrest, the surrender. But he is just so leaning into it. Now, we talked about the mugshot. Take a look at the New York Post, and it's, front page everywhere, but this doesn't even have a headline. And, of course, the merchandising of it, the fact that he went on Twitter for the first time since 2021, even though he said today that Truth Social is still his platform, going back and trying to find even more people to look at it. And they say that that's going to be the theme of the campaign.
And it's classic Donald Trump, and I think he believes that it can work for him. And Donald Trump made a bet in 2016 that you don't need to worry about the middle, that you can just rally Republican voters, you can turn out new Republican voters, and that can be enough. And I think that is a dubious proposition, and I think it's a failed look at why he actually won in 2016. But so many Republicans have internalized that as the way forward. And so that's what Donald Trump is going to try to do here. He's going to try to make this existential for him and his supporters, that this election is about whether or not Donald Trump obviously stays out of jail, but whether he is there to protect the U.S. president. He's going to try to make this an emotional plea to turn out as many voters who are concerned about elites in power and all the things he talks about, and try to drive turnout that way. I don't think he is capable of going any other way. So it's not surprising. I just don't think that it's actually going to work. But it's probably the only thing they can really do at this point.
And do you think, Brendan, looking at the candidates on that stage, that anybody can break out of the pack? Now, Vivek is going to appear on Meet the Press. He was on Fox this morning, and he seemed to be moderating some of his really controversial foreign policy positions regarding Vladimir Putin and, protecting Taiwan and our other allies. So he was a little bit softer in his criticisms and his pushback against Nikki Haley. But I don't know how he's going to take sitting on, going on Meet the Press and explaining some of those positions.
Yeah, he very clearly doesn't know what he's doing in a lot of these things, and it's what you often see with first-time candidates. They're exploring some of these issues for the first time, and they don't really know what they're talking about. I think it is only a gift to Donald Trump that Vivek is the person who has emerged from this debate. He's obviously the person who's been defending Donald Trump the most. I actually don't understand why so many of the other candidates were attacking him and elevating him this way, other than just being annoyed by him. But the more you lift him up, who is not a serious candidate, the more it only helps Donald Trump. So for that reason, I can't imagine Donald Trump showing up at the next debate. I think this was a very good week for him in terms of the winning the primary, which seems all but certain at this point.
And David Jolly, you served in Congress. What about Jim Jordan and the Judiciary Committee? And now investigating Fani Willis, or saying that they're launching an investigation into her.
Yeah, look, Andrea, House Republicans are intent to try to interfere with the criminal prosecutions of Donald Trump. You've seen that in the Alvin Bragg case in New York. You're going to see that in Georgia. There's very little they can do. But what we do know is that they're going to use every tool at their disposal as a campaign arm of the Republican nominee, likely Donald Trump. So you can expect them to try to continue to investigate the investigators. And then I do think you'll see Jim Jordan and other committee chairs probably pursue an impeachment inquiry, like Kevin McCarthy has said, despite the fact the evidence doesn't really lead them there.